1. So around 11 years ago, I was a telecoms engineer. The normal day went to a few residential houses, either fitted or fixed phone lines. Everything was no different from any other day. But then I downloaded my next job, and I got a 20-line installation. Now, this is not the norm for the role I had. All these tasks usually went to other teams. No issues. I thought it would be nice to be somewhere for longer than an hour or two, then here, there, and everywhere. I called the contact. It's a contact center, who tells me that either the caretaker or the manager of the building is aware and will explain what is required. So I arrived, and it's a really old building built in the 1920s, I later found out. I take my way in tester and tool bag, as is the norm, and after speaking with a receptionist, I discovered that the building was at one point a nursing home, and after being derelict for a few years, is now being used as offices for various businesses. As promised, 2 managers arrive and tell me what they think I'm looking for is in the cellar, and that there's lots of cables down there, and that's all they know. So I asked if the caretaker is about, as they usually know these types of things. I was told that he wasn't in, as he was ill, but was due back the next day. I follow this man and woman to a padlocked door. They open it up. They tell me the code, and on the other side of the door is a stairwell that just leads down to the cellar. As we get down there, the light is poor, really poor. I've no chance of working like this. I mean, there were lights, yes, but you're talking about pendant lights that weren't great. Understanding this, the woman tells me that they have hanging lights, so no issues. I go back to the van, grab an extension, and head back towards the cellar. As I'm passing the receptionist, she asked, "Are you going down in the cellar on your own?" Well, I just replied, "Yeah, sometimes you have to, but if what I'm looking for isn't there, I won't be for long." She laughed but told me, "Rather you than me, nobody likes going down there, even for storage space." Now, I'll be honest, I just thought people didn't like stairs to a dark place. No worries, but not something I'm unfamiliar with. So it just needs done. After a quick look around with the male manager, we find a socket. I sort the lights, and yep, there is a DP I'm looking for, but it's an older solder block, no good for broadband, so I tell him that this is going to take a bit longer, and this is even before knowing where these 20 lines need to go. He just agrees and shows me where the office fitters have left all the cables for the clients, which, to my relief, is in the cupboard behind the receptionist. So all set. Knowing what I know, I crack on. I'm testing all the lines, and it's going well. I have more than half of them going to the cabinet and a few shy. But I know the area, and know from there I can get them through, so it's got 200 pair cables that run through it. At this point, it's around 4 o'clock. I don't have the blocks I need on the van, so tag up the cables and turn off all the lights on my way out before closing and locking the door as I leave. I sign out and tell the girl at the desk I'll see her tomorrow and go. On my way home, I called my manager to tell them the script and that I may need a hand for half a day or more, as I'm not sure anything has been done in the exchange. The next day, 8 a.m., I get a call from one of the other lads who tells me he is with me all day, and that's all he knows. We sort out a roll each. I'll push the pairs from the box to the cab, you do the cab and exchange if needed, and then it's just a case of fitting the box and running a large internal cable from the box to behind the receptionist. I make my way into the building once again, open the door with the code, and to my surprise, all the lights are on. No, I'm 100% sure I turned them off. So I'm guessing one of the managers may have come to check if I was still there and left them on by mistake. I go down and do what I need to do to push through the cables outside, call my mate, and he's getting them one by one, so it's going well. I finish up and head back to fit the block. I grab all the blocks, drill all the bits, etc., etc., set mark for the pilot holes, and just hear, "What are you doing?" After nearly jumping out of my skin, I turn to see this man with grey overalls on. So I say, "I'm just doing what's been asked. Are you the caretaker?" He replies that he is, and says that nobody's been down here for years, and was surprised that I'm here. I just cracked on. Did the drilling, etc. And then as soon as I stopped with the drill and it was quieter, the guy started chatting away.
What football team do you support? Do you mind if I watch what you're doing?
I told him no worries, and just tried to be as polite as I could. He then told me that his name was Gordon, and that he'd been working there for 30 years. A bit confused, recalling what the receptionist had said, I told him I was under the impression that this place had been empty for a few years, and looking at the cabling, it's not been updated for at least 15, 20 years. He just said that things are always happening here. After about an hour of back and forth while I'm working, I hear a hello from the top of the stairwell. Expecting Gordon to answer, I didn't. Then it came again, so I turned around and Gordon was gone now. I'm thinking I've been waffling for 10 minutes and he's not even here. I pop up, and it's one of the managers asking if I'm expecting somebody, another engineer. So I apologize, explain the phone signal isn't very good down there, so he probably hasn't been able to get a hold of me. All cleared, he comes down, we chat for 5, and he tells me he will start at the receptionist end and work to me while I finish. A quick toilet break, and I go back down. I'm in the final stages now. I'm just putting phone numbers to pairs. As for when my mate gets there, we can connect the test and go. As I'm doing this, I hear, "Sorry about that." Again out of nowhere, is Gordon, so I just acknowledge it. Call him clever and make a joke that if they can't find you, they can't ask you to do anything. I continue for 5 minutes, and I've done all I can, so I tell him I'm going to head up to assist my mate, and will be done and out of the way. Gordon then told me he liked the company and has been nice to talk. I felt saddened at this point, thinking he was maybe treated poorly by people in the building. So I just said, "Of course, mate. Costs nothing to be nice and have a chat." So I go up the stairs, leaving Gordon down there, and help get the cable through a void and into the cellar. 10 or 20 minutes of trying to fish it through, and we got it. We go down, Gordon is not around, and we finish. My mate tells me it's time for food. He will go to the chippy and meet me back at the yard, as I tell him I just need a few signatures and to make sure the lights go back so I can get my extension lead. I get what I need from the manager's signatures and show him where the link is behind the reception. Inform him that I need to get my extension lead, so are the lights okay there for now? Or does he want me to move them as we go as there's good light? He states that they might as well stay there for now, and he will get another lead in case anybody else needs to go down there. I head down and start unplugging the lights, and Gordon appears again, telling me he didn't realize the lights were mine, as he wouldn't have touched them. Straight away I thought, so that's why they were on this morning. But then it dawned. The door. It was locked. I asked him if he had come down yesterday evening, and he said,
"Yes, of course. I'm always here when I'm needed."
Confused and wanting to disappear, I said, "No worries. Nice to meet you." I placed my hand to put a shake, and he just raised his hand and said,
"Hope to see you soon."
So I left, signed out, and thought nothing of it. Then a week goes by, and I get a call from our control, asking if I can return to this address as one of the lines isn't working and it's high level. So I say, yep, no worries. I get there, say hello again to the receptionist. I asked if I could just check behind her first before having to go into the cellar. With some joy, it is there, it's just not fit properly. As I'm sorting, an older guy asks me if I was the one who was here last week. I say yes. He apologized and stated that he was the caretaker and had to take more days off than planned. I just told him, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'm sure Gordon will tell you where everything is." As soon as I say this, he just looked me dead in the eye and said, "What did you just say?" So I said, "Gordon, he told me he is the caretaker here." The guy went white and just asked me if we could talk outside, so I followed. He simply asked me if I believed in ghosts, then told me that before this was what it is today, it was a nursing home, and the old caretaker was a man called Gordon. He knew this as when the building was taken over, he found an old desk with to-do lists, letters, and requests for a Gordon, and there was a sign on the door which said caretaker. And where this desk was, that door led to the cellar. I immediately rubbished this and started laughing, thinking him and his mate were pulling my leg. He then asked me if he was wearing overalls, which I replied he was. He just looked me dead in the eye and said, "Listen, mate, I'm not lying. Gordon passed away years ago, supposedly on the job. I just thought you should know, as it's not something that's considered funny," telling me he's been mocked as he has also seen Gordon. But people have just never believed him. I never said a thing to anybody beyond that until one night, fishing with a friend, and just like he said, he thought I was taking the piss. I know what I saw. I know what I heard. I don't tell this to anybody as it's not worth the ridicule, hence why I'm using a throwaway account. Ghosts or spirits are real. 2. Howdy y'all. As with many, I've always been into the paranormal, but never really believed in any of it. I've sought out ways of experiencing paranormal things, but anytime I've had something happen, I've had a way of dismissing it and could chalk it up to just a weird occurrence. About a year ago, though, I switched roles in the museum I work at. I've been here for 5 years, and some weird things have happened. But again, you can rule out most weird coincidences. But when I moved into the collections department, where the people who take care of the objects and artifacts in the museum's possession and on loans, things got weird. Really weird, really fast. Everyone talks about museums being haunted, and it's understandable. We house and care for lots of really old, sometimes creepy objects, and many of them have storied pasts. Our collection is roughly 200,000 pieces, and we have some doozies. To make it short, I have been seeing shadows, hearing my name, and having lights turn on and off when I am alone. Our storage is split into 3 areas. The upstairs mezzanine is home to our toy and puppet collections. Downstairs has 3 connected areas split into 2 rooms, textiles by itself, and American materials and ethnographic and world objects in the main area. And the 3rd area is a separate part of the museum split into 2 and houses larger objects and natural sciences. The most convincing evidence I have experienced for the existence of paranormal activity happened about a month ago, and it really stuck with me. To set the scene, I was in our textiles room, lower level storage, in a room off of the main area with the world objects, returning some clothing we had shown on a tour. To briefly explain the storage setup, you come down the stairs and go left into the world objects, or right, and take a turn into the American materials. However, the stairs are the only thing separating the areas, so the stairwell is more like a donut hole than anything. Turning left into world objects and immediately taking another left will let you walk perpendicular to the aisles of world objects and brings you to the right side of American materials. On that right wall, looking out into American materials, is the door into textiles. It's normal practice, like with most places, to only have lights on in an area you're working. So I had lights on at the base of the stairwell, the very front of world objects, and that illuminated enough of my path into the textiles room. Up until now, I had had the lights off. Doors slam, heard my name, and heard objects move, basic things, but stuff I could ignore, look past, or explain away. I went down the stairs into this area and was immediately overcome with panic and anxiety. The room was cold and there was just a bad energy. I turned around, sat in my office for a couple of minutes thinking I was just having a panic attack and cooling off, and decided to just ignore it. I went back down, hit the lights, beelined it into the textiles room, and started putting things back in place. I felt like I was being watched the entire time I walked through the lower level, but didn't think about it, and figured I was just paranoid, but I couldn't shake this gut feeling of paranoia. Then I left the room. That's when it got bad. I opened the door and I could see all the way across American materials. The last shelving unit on the far wall from me is where we keep items from a famously deceased child. The family donated all of their belongings after their passing. There weren't any lights on in that area, but I could see someone. It looked like a fully grown man. probably around 6 feet tall, and the shape was hulking. But they were darker than dark. They were darker than the shadows of the room. I'm telling you guys, with my oath on whatever you want, that I could see this person that was darker than an unlit wall, and it sprinted. I mean, absolutely ran as fast as I've ever seen anyone run into the closet wall. Not at me, not to scare me, but sprinted to its right, which was only about 10 feet away from it, into a cement wall. This all took place in about 5 seconds, and I just ignored it. I just quick walked out of the storage, flipped the lights, and hauled it up the stairs. I got about halfway up the stairs when the hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up, and I heard someone say my name, and the doorknob at the base of the stairs started to turn. I didn't even stop to listen. I'm sure there's a way of explaining it. Again, I very much could have been having a panic attack, but the anxiety went away just about as soon as I walked back upstairs the first time. Since then, things have gotten stranger, with objects moving in front of me and other people in the department, or doors closing in front of us. Like I said, things have happened since I've been here, and there are plenty of stories of before I was in the department or at the museum. But this thing a month ago was just different. I'm only sharing this now because last night I had a dream where a ghost or something was holding my mouth closed and pushing me on my back. And when I woke up, it was happening too. I feel like things are just getting weirder and weirder with me. And I've been looking into shadow people and other sorts of weird apparitions. I doubt this gets much traction, but if anyone wants to chip in on ideas as to what this might be, or how to explain it, I'd love to hear any and all thoughts. Wishing all my best to you. 3. My daughter gave my wife a granular wax candle kit for Christmas. You pour the granules in any appropriate container, put one of the supplied wicks down in the granules, and you have a candle. Optionally, add essential oil as scent, and it just soaks into the granules. It was a very thoughtful gift. My wife loves it, and I have grown to like it too. Because of how it looks after the wick is melted, the granules as it burns, and creates a well like any candle does. But having the rest of it still be those loose granules, I think it's neat. Then, when the wick is completely burned, you can lift the solidified wax out and either crush it to put back in the mix, or get rid of it so you'll only have the tiny granules next time. We set it up in a thick-walled, fairly large but short square glass on the top shelf near our bedroom door. My wife goes to bed before me most nights and likes the candle lit. I blow it out when I come to bed, very gently, because I want to retain that look of deep well in the granules as long as the wick will last. And I'm so careful to keep that look that I take pains to not disturb the granules next time I light it. We have a cat that is not allowed in the bedroom at night. Or ever, if we can help it. Her litter box is in the basement. So we leave the door from down there to our main floor living space propped open. The basement has an exterior door and some windows, so someone could break in and would have no other locks between them and our main space. So I also put a doorknob bar in place against our bedroom door when I go to bed. Then at least someone would have to expend a fair amount of effort or make some noise to get in, rather than just jimmying one of those useless indoor locks. All this happened as normal last night. I gently blew out the candle, disturbing nothing except the flame, locked the doorknob, put the bar in place, and went to bed. This morning, I found the candle completely stirred around, the solidified wax partially crushed, granules piled up in random spots in the corners of the glass, like somebody just played around with it for a minute. None of the granules spilled, and the candle itself not moved. My wife admitted to getting up to get a drink and take an Advil. But that is a common occurrence. She would have no reason to disturb the candle. She said she did not, and relocked and rebarred the door. I did not remember getting up during the night, and I usually do not. We discussed sleepwalking, but neither of us have done it in decades, that we know of. We have seen no evidence of other animals, nothing else disturbed, nothing chewed up, no droppings, no noise sufficient to wake us. I'm pretty messed up by the fact that it's only one thing I can find being disturbed, and how much I enjoy the look of the candle makes it feel like it was somehow personal, or at least a thing that I would take more notice of. So obviously a camera is going up, and we'll see what I get. Neither of us like the idea of a camera in the bedroom, but I'm not going to cloud connect it, and I intend to find out early in the movie if I'm living in the country. I know it's possible my wife is messing with me and gaslighting me, but I really don't have any reason to think that's it. We get along great, we're happy. Life is fairly stress-free considering. There's really no reason for that to be happening. In any case, if that's it, the camera will stop it unless they can find another thing to mess with that's not being monitored. Then I'll monitor that thing, and so on. So let's just say that wasn't it. What the heck then? 4. Just wanted to share my experience with the internet. When I was a third year in college, I was one of the RAs in this house on campus. My school is on an island off the coast of Maine, and most of the buildings, except the new dorms, are converted New England mansions and cottages, some built in the 1800s. The house I was in is a converted mansion complete with the servants' quarters and nursery. I was a senior RA, so I got the old master bedroom, which was at the far end of the house next to a fire escape. Prior to classes starting, the RAs go through a training week. It was actually 2 weeks, and everyone stays in this house since it's the biggest, and then moves to their respective houses at the end of training. The other RAs all stayed in the servants' quarters. More fun, I guess. So other than feeling a little lonely on my side of the house, I was content to unpack throughout the week on my own. Things started about 3 days into training, when I started finding colorful craft feathers inside my stuff. As in, I'd open a sealed box, and there would be a craft feather in there. Or I'd take out a pair of pants from the drawer, and underneath I'd find a feather. They were always tucked away, except one that was in the middle of my floor. It was odd, but I chalked it up to mice in the house and disregarded it. Then one night early on, I was awakened to footsteps in the hall. My immediate thought was that something was wrong and another RA was coming to get me. There was no other reason someone would be down here at this time. I took note of the time, 2 a.m., on the dot. I could hear the footsteps come up to the door and then nothing. I was a little spooked, but I figured I'd ask about it in the morning. Next morning, none of the RAs admitted to walking down my hall at that hour, so I let it go. Until that night, it happened again. The footsteps woke me up, and again it was 2 a.m. on the dot. Then it happened the following night. I started to get freaked out until someone suggested it could be a night watchman. Because this school is a total hippie college, we didn't have proper security on campus. But we did have 2 old Mainers who did nightly rounds. They would walk through the dorm's public spaces and check that alarms were working, nobody needed anything, etc. Great guys, knew them by name, and they were always friendly. Of course. It had to be them. The timed footsteps, the fact that my room was beside the fire escape, they probably went down those stairs, and I just couldn't hear them. I decided I would meet the night watchman at 2 a.m. so I could put this behind me. I set my alarm for 1:55 a.m. and propped my door open, turned on all my lights, sat on my bed, and waited for the night watchman to come by. At 2 a.m., I hear footsteps approaching. They are getting close until it sounds like they are right at my door, but there's no one there. I get up, and I go to my door and look down the hallway. Nobody is there. Because I'm petrified and need a rational explanation, I call out, "Is anybody there?" Immediately, everything that I had on my door, my name, RA papers, the little door signs and my doorknob, everything falls off at once. Terrified, I slam and lock my door and keep the lights on all night. In the morning, I tell my fellow RAs, and they're all laughing at me, thinking I have an overactive imagination. I suspected maybe they were pranking me, but then things escalated. Fast forward to orientation week. My house is all freshmen, so I know their schedules, which is pretty much in mandatory orientation sessions in the lecture hall. I decided I needed a nap before lunch and went to my room and slept from 12 to 12:30. I would catch the end of lunch before they stopped serving at 1 p.m. I am completely alone in the house. I wake up with my alarm at 12:30 and head out to lunch. I decide to cross all the way through the servants' quarters because their fire escape and external door dumps out onto the main path. To get to the servants' quarters, I have to pass through the other main rooms, and there is this sort of a threshold that has a large bathroom between the house sections. As I pass by, the door handle is turning back and forth, like someone is stuck inside. Despite my weird experiences, my first thought is that someone is legitimately stuck in the bathroom. It happened to a few RAs during training. The door is warped and doesn't fit the frame perfectly. I knock on the door and say, "Hey, this door sticks, let me help you." But they ignore me and keep turning the knob and rattling the door. I knock and repeat my offer to help, but they continue. Then the door flies open and slams in my face. Then it opens again and slams in my face. Then it opens slowly and stays open. Because I'm dumb or just duty-bound, I feel like I need to check and make sure I don't have a resident stuck in there or something. I step inside the bathroom. There is no one there. I run out of the house and into the dining hall and find my co-RA who lives in the servants' quarters of the house and tell her what happened. She just tells me there's a logical explanation. The window was probably open and caused a pressure difference. I'm so scared I tell her no way that this is what happened. That night, to the amusement of my residents, I walk through the house and say out loud, "If there's a spirit here, I don't want you to feel like you can't live here, but we have to coexist peacefully. I am terrified of you, and I don't want to be. We can both live here, just please don't show yourself to me at night, and please let me sleep when I go to sleep." I feel like I needed to make boundaries, but I also didn't think I could ask it to leave. Things smoothed over. Sometimes I would get the feeling that something was in my room when I'd be studying, like a friend sitting down on my bed or something. When I was ready for bed, I'd announce it, and I would feel like the presence would leave. But it could totally just be my brain making things up. Fast forward to Halloween. I've come down with pneumonia, and I'm very, very sick. I spent a day in the hospital, and then was sent back to campus with meds. A couple days pass. My co-RA comes to check on me one night and asks me how I'm doing. I tell her I'm getting there, but my room is a disaster. Clothes and papers everywhere. I start to get up, saying I'd feel better if I could just put the papers in one pile and the clothes in another. She tells me she'll help me do this tomorrow, but now I should sleep. I fall asleep, but I'm awakened by noises in my room. I also had a mouse problem, so I was careful never to leave food in my room. I realized maybe I forgot to bring a mug or something downstairs. So I turn on my headlamp to look for the source of the noise and deal with the plate or whatever. As I'm shining my headlamp, I see one of my sweaters slide across the floor. Then a folder in the opposite direction, then more clothes and papers. Everything was sorting itself just like I wanted. I was terrified to say out loud, "I'm so grateful that you're trying to help me, but I'm so sick and need to sleep. Please stop." And then everything stopped. I fell asleep. In the morning, my co-RA tells me I must have been feverish and did it myself. I guess it's possible, but I know what I saw and I no longer had a fever at this point. The following year, I asked the head of buildings and grounds who was here since the college opened, whether anyone died in that house. He told me before this was a college, the owners of the house had a 3-year-old boy who died on the premises. I'd love to believe it was his spirit just looking for a friend. I hope he's moved on now, but I have a sort of fondness for those spooky experiences. Nothing has happened to me since, so I really think there was something about that place. It's been 11 years since I lived there. 5. I think this took place in 2020 when everyone got laid off due to COVID. So my friends and I decided to stay together as I didn't have any family where I was living, and staying cooped up alone for 2 months didn't seem like a great idea. Mental health, y'all. ADHD and anxiety are not a good mix in solitude. We had already previously worked together, so I just quarantined at their house with them. After the 2 weeks and everything being closed, we got really bored and decided to explore the bush where we knew we wouldn't see people. We ended up going to a lot of really cool abandoned towns, firehouses, etc. My friends live on a reservation, so they had access to a lot of the land that not just anyone could rock up onto. And one day we decided to go to this church that was abandoned, located right off the highway on the edge of the reserve. I had seen this place whilst driving along the highway multiple times, and always wondered what the backstory was, as it was a very dilapidated building. And now, after knowing what I know after the event, I don't know why they didn't tear it down. So we pulled into the parking lot, which was basically just a dirt road that led further into the res, and parked. Initially, I took a mental note of how much creepier it looked up close, just dark and foreboding. My friend's husband didn't seem bothered at all, so I thought it might just be nerves to finally be able to check it out. When we first entered, there was a 2-door entrance, so you enter the first door from the outside and you come into this little square room with a ladder going up to the attic. And then there is a second floor leading into the church itself. No amount of money could have gotten me up into that attic. It was pitch black and rickety, and the vibe was just not there. We closed the outside door, and as soon as we entered the second door, the room felt stale and lifeless. The air was very still and still. It almost felt like we had stepped into a sensory deprivation room. It just felt off. We walked past the pews towards where the podium was located on this small little stage that overlooked the room. There was a rickety staircase that led up to the second floor of pews. I went up and checked it out, but nothing out of the ordinary was to be found. It was pretty cool nonetheless. We continued towards this small back room behind the stage, and this is where shit gets freaky. So there's 5 of us in this church, my friend, her husband, and her 2 kids, as well as myself. We were a few steps away from this room entrance, when this sickly cold feeling washed over me. It was so intense and sudden, I verbally said, "It just got really cold in here." And right when I finished that last word, the second entrance door to the church itself that we had left open slammed shut so loud. We all went silent and just looked at each other, and my friend actually questioned if we were meant to be in here. This is where the history lesson comes in that I did not know previous to entering the building. This was at some point a residential school, and is realistically not very far from where all those bodies of indigenous children were found buried in British Columbia. I had no idea it was a residential school at any point. I'm not sure I would have entered had I known previously, and I will never go back due to what happened later that night. So my friend's husband gives us a historical rundown of the place, and we decided to leave shortly after, and again, the vibe just wasn't there. That night, I ended up going back home to my own house. I felt kind of off and fell asleep quicker than normal. Middle of the night, I think it was roughly 2 a.m., and I sat up in bed, out of a dead-ass sleep. I opened my eyes, and suddenly I let out this breath as if I was underwater for a while. It was a long-winded breath, and I have never done this before. It's almost as if I was throwing up air. In the brief seconds after exhaling, all that crossed my mind was the church and an entity. It's hard to explain because I don't even know what happened, but my thoughts were cued into the church and an entity. A literal second after this, I dropped down on my back and was asleep until I woke up the next morning. I remember the night's events vividly, as if I hadn't been sleeping the whole time, but I was. I think that church had a very dark history, and going in unprotected and ignorant to its past, made me very vulnerable to whatever entities were stuck inside, and one latched onto me. I've had many paranormal experiences in my life, and I am sensitive to whatever is on the other side, but this was the first and only event where something like this happened. Sometimes I feel like there is a force watching over me, and that's what ejected this entity out and away from me. I've had many moments in my life where I was very close to death, and miraculously I didn't get hurt. And I really believe someone is watching over me and has my back, because the way this thing got expelled out of me felt so surreal, and even now I struggle to explain it clearly enough. I never went back, and never planned to. Even when other friends mentioned they want to check it out, I want no part of it. I do have video footage of when the door slammed in the church. The faces of my friends will have to be edited out, so if anyone's interested in seeing that, I will gladly find a way to blur them and send the link over. The video shows none of us are near the entrance door when it slams shut directly after I mention how cold it's gotten. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 313. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do spook the like button and share the video around with friends and family. It helps the channel greatly when you do so. Thank you kindly. Alright, let's see. Now before I go and have a little rest, let's have Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, if money was not a factor, if you were wealthy and you had everything was taken care of, you didn't have to worry about bills or food, or you're taking care of your family, would you want to remain in your current profession, or would there be something else you would pursue, and what might that be? I can honestly say if I were rich, I would want to continue doing what I'm doing, because yes, it pays the bills, barely sometimes, but it pays the bills, and it gives me joy. And if you find a job that pays you for something you enjoy, I think it's possible you would do it if you didn't even have to do it for the money. I'd love to see some of your answers in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.